12 spine-chilling encounters with the sinister Bigfoot that haunt America today. The moon hung large and low as shadows danced across the yard. In Maplewood, the cold grip of fear slithered through the streets like smoke in the night air. Sarah, a single mother, felt it coil around her heart as she checked the clock for the third time. Max was late again. Panic set in, turning the world outside into a maze of suffocating darkness. Memories of the stories, tales of Bigfoot lurking in Green Ridge Forest, flooded her mind. Each creak of the old house echoed, filling the silence with unspoken threats. She peered from the window, half expecting to see Max's familiar silhouette. Instead, she found twisted branches clawing at the sky. The forest loomed ominously like a monstrous presence. The texts flooded in, each one more frantic than the last. Whispers, shadows moving, something was out there. Sarah grabbed her flashlight, her hand shaking as she stepped outside. The forest, once a vast playground for her son, morphed into a backdrop of nightmares. Every rustle of the leaves unnerved her. She stumbled onto a twisted path that seemed to breathe, like it was alive with the stories she knew too well. A chill raced down her spine as a growl rumbled in the distance, deep and sinister, a reminder that legends were born from truths buried in silence. Out of nowhere, Mr. Thompson appeared, smug grin fading as he noticed her distress. His words spun a web of concern, but the glint in his eyes felt sharp, predatory. Did he know something? Did he share in the quiet fear that clung to the townsfolk? "You should be careful, Sarah," he said. "The woods have secrets, dangerous ones." She could almost taste his hidden knowledge, a rancid flavor in her mouth as he spoke of the Bigfoot sightings, dismissing them as quaint folklore. Driven by instinct, she pressed onward. The air thickened as shadow and sound melded into one, blurring the line between myths and reality. Her heart raced, thudding in her ears like a war drum. Each step took her deeper, further from safety, until a footprint stopped her in her tracks. Unnatural, huge, not a bear or deer. It sent terror jolting through her veins. "Mom, help!" Max's voice shattered the stillness, sharp and desperate, resonating through the trees. Relief and panic clashed within her. She tore through the underbrush, calling to him, her voice strangled with fear. But then another growl echoed, closer now, chilling and primal, a promise of dread. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The darkness closed in as she darted through the forest, branches clawing at her skin like hands reaching out for her soul. Max's voice rang again, closer, but the growl echoed louder, an insatiable hunger stirring in the shadows. She sprinted, fueled by maternal dread, but fear coiled tight around her heart, squeezing with every breath. The forest was alive, pulsing with an invisible energy, and she felt it shift. Just beyond a cluster of trees, her flashlight flickered. A figure loomed, a shadow stretching, menacing, growing. She had to find Max, had to escape whatever darkness lurked in the sinister heart of Green Ridge Forest. But as she called out again, shivers ran down her spine. Her instincts screamed that they were not alone, not anymore. Branches cracked underfoot as Sarah plunged deeper into the suffocating darkness, heart racing with every frantic pulse. Max's cries pierced the night, pulling her forward, guiding her through the monstrous labyrinth of trees. The shadows danced like wraiths, teasing her with movements out of the corner of her eye. She couldn't shake the sensation that every unseen creature was watching, waiting. "Max!" she yelled, her voice trembling. The echo slipped through the trees, swallowed whole by the oppressive silence. Sweat trickled down her back. The chill of the air clung to her skin, amplifying the dread knotting in her stomach. Each growl reverberated closer, hungry and low, vibrating in her bones. As Sarah rounded a particularly gnarled oak, a flash of movement caught her attention. Instinctively, she raised her flashlight, beam slicing through the blackness. For a split second, it illuminated a face, horribly distorted, eyes glowing with an uncanny light. It took her breath away. An image burned into her mind before it vanished, like smoke drifting into the void. "Mom!" The desperation in Max's voice jolted her back, fueling her drive. She pressed onward, unwilling to let fear pull her under. But doubt wormed its way into her thoughts. What if she didn't reach him in time? What if whatever hunted them got to him first? With a sudden burst, she stumbled into a small clearing. The moonlight painted the scene in ghostly white. It felt oddly serene, yet wrong, its beauty almost mocking considering the terror that lurked. A shiver cascaded down her spine as the breath of wind whispered through the tall grass. Max's cries were mere echoes now, swallowed by the yawning darkness surrounding her. And then she saw it. The footprint was colossal, embedded into the soft earth, each toe distinctly clawed. Her mind raced. Had it been a fluke? The prior notions of folklore she had dismissed echoed louder, pressing against her sanity. This was all too real. Her breath quickened as panic clawed at her throat. "Max, where are you?" she shouted again, voice strained. Suddenly, the growl returned, a guttural sound that filled her with a bone-deep terror. Shadows started to shift along the edges of the clearing, creeping closer. Sarah whipped around, her flashlight flickering uncertainly. The cold, unnerving silence tightened around her like a vice. Her senses heightened, teetering between fight and flight. She was not alone. Something was out there. The growl morphed into a snarl, close, so close, and she could almost feel the hot breath wash over her. The trees swayed and cracked as if they too were restless with anticipation. "Mom!" A cry, but different this time, haunted. It was right behind her, choked with fear. Without thinking, Sarah bolted back into the trees, dodging branches as they lashed out, yearning to strip her from safety. The growling escalated into a series of thunderous roars, vibrating the earth beneath her feet. Shadows flickered around her, gliding just out of reach, taunting her. She had to find him. She had to reach Max. But could she outrun whatever was stalking them? With every heartbeat, darkness threatened to swallow her whole. Was the forest a refuge or a predator's lair? She stumbled over roots, feeling her pulse in her throat, the primal instinct to survive kicking in fiercely. The growl roared again, and this time it wasn't just a sound, it was a warning. Who would reach Max first, her or the beast? A crash to her right sent her spinning, her heart in her throat, pulse pounding with dread. Light flooded in as she broke through more branches, finally gasping, eyes wild, searching for movement, for him. But what awaited her was worse than she had imagined. As she stepped into another opening, she froze in terror, mouth dry. It wasn't just Max's figure she saw stumbling by the tree line. A sight more horrifying pinned her down with icy fear. In the moonlit night, she beheld the sprawling silhouette of the creature itself, massive, powerful, and looking right at her. Sarah's breaths came quick, each one heavier than the last. She had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Was there still time to save her son, or was it already too late? The creature loomed like a shadow made flesh, rippling muscles stark against the spectral light of the moon. Its eyes, twin orbs of pale fire, bore into Sarah, paralyzing her where she stood. Deep inside her, a scream twisted and churned, but she could only manage a whimper as fear constricted her throat. "Max!" she shouted, forcing the name past her clenched teeth. The darkness swallowed the sound, leaving an empty echo. Somehow, the silence that followed tasted worse than the growl, the terror of the unknown. She wasn't just terrified of the creature, she was terrified of what it might do to her son. The beast shifted, muscles tensing beneath its thick, matted fur. Was it sniffing the air? If it was, it had caught her scent. The last shred of doubt fell away. This wasn't folklore. This was horror, raw and primal, playing out before her eyes. "Run, Max!" Sarah screamed, and finally she forced her feet into motion. She turned. Instinct overpowering reason, sprinting back into the trees, the creature's presence breathing down her neck. "Where are you?" she cried, but the forest only echoed back. Branches clawed at her skin, leaves rustled ominously, a cacophony of terror enveloping her. Every footfall rang out like a war drum, urging her on, yet dread weighed her down. What if she were running away from Max? Suddenly, a sound halted her, a low whimper laced with fear. It pulled at her heart like a siren's call. "Max!" She hesitated, torn between fleeing and finding him, the instinct to protect clawing at her senses. "Mom, help!" His voice, close, strummed the chords of her deepest fear. She had to choose. She had to find him. With renewed desperation, she ducked under branches, forcing her way toward the sound. The growling behind her tamed into something more sinister, like a predator savoring the hunt. She wasn't just being hunted, she was caught in a trap. Panting hard, she glimpsed a figure ahead, weaving among the trees in a panic. It wasn't just an apparition, it was Max. Relief surged through her, but it came crashing down when she saw the creature's dark shape looming nearby, stalking them both. "Max, this way!" Sarah waved her arms, signaling him to move toward her. He stumbled, fear etching itself into his small features, and for a fleeting moment she could see him, her brave little boy. But the moment shattered as the creature let out a low, rumbling growl that echoed through the trees. Max paused, frozen in place. "Mom!" The panic in his voice sent shockwaves through her. "It's coming! Run, now!" The urge to get him to safety propelled her forward, and she reached for him. But just as she lunged, darkness engulfed the clearing. Black shadows slashed through the moonlight as the creature lunged, a blur of wrath and power. Sarah's stomach dropped. She had seconds, no time for fear. She needed to save him. As Max sprinted toward her, the creature blocked his path, its eyes glowing brighter than ever. The ground trembled underfoot. Sarah raced back, determined to shield him, but she tripped over roots that seemed to reach up and snare her. "Mom!" She could feel the energy around her shift, a deep-seated rumble of chaos. The creature was relentless, and she could see those terrible claws glinting in the moonlight. With a scream, she rolled to her side, lunging forward as the monster swiped at the air where she'd just been. Adrenaline surged through her body as she seized Max's arm, pulling him past her as the beast turned toward them, its breath a hot wind mixing with the chill of the night. "Go, Max, run!" she shouted, tears of fear and fury streaming down her face. But as Max fled, Sarah stood frozen, staring down the creature as horror settled heavy in the air. This was not a fight for survival. It was a dance with death. What would she do when it came down to saving herself or saving her son? The choice burned in her gut, but time was slipping away. Could she save him before the darkness consumed them both? As she turned to follow Max, the creature's roar split the silence, a terrifying declaration of its intent. It wasn't finished with them yet, and they were running out of time. What would they sacrifice to escape the grip of the abyss? Sarah sprinted into the murky darkness of the trees, her heart racing in tune with the throbbing rhythm of panic. Every snap of twig underfoot felt like a countdown, each rustle among the branches a reminder of the danger lurking behind her. She cast a quick glance over her shoulder, but all she saw was shadow flickering against the faint light of the moon. The growl echoed through the woods, low and menacing. It reverberated in her bones, a chilling melody of predation. "Max!" she cried again, her voice raw as she stumbled through the dense underbrush. The air grew thick, soaked in dread, wrapping around her like a suffocating shroud. A weak, plaintive whimper drifted through the trees, cutting through her terror. It was closer now, and she paused, straining to catch a glimpse of her son. "Max!" she called, desperation clawing at her throat. Suddenly she heard rustling, followed by a gasp, a sound unmistakably human. "Mom?" His voice, small and scared, sent adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I'm here! I'm coming!" She pushed forward, sprinting toward the sound that was both to her salvation and potential doom. But then came a dreadful silence, thick as smoke. Each heartbeat echoed in her ears, quickened by a sheer instinct to plunge back into the clearing, to scoop up her son and flee. Through breaks in the trees, she glimpsed shadows writhing, shapes shifting in the darkness. The creature was here, hovering like a storm cloud, waiting for its moment. She broke into the clearing, breathless and terrified, her eyes darting for Max, but he was gone. "Max!" In that instant, the world seemed to tilt. The shadows morphed into a shape, a monstrous silhouette, easily towering above her, its breath rasping in belabored waves. She could see it now, muscles rippling under grotesque fur, eyes like burning coals locked on her. An electric charge coursed between them, a knowing of predator and prey. "Run!" Sarah commanded herself more than her son, driven by some primal instinct to survive. She turned, scanning the tree line, desperate to catch a glimpse of Max's familiar face. And then the creature lunged, claws slicing through the air. Time slowed. She could see every detail, the glint of its fangs, the snarl rippling across its lips, the potency of its muscles coiling to spring forward. Panic filled her lungs. With a reflex born of pure terror, she dove to the side, narrowly escaping the creature's onslaught. The ground beneath her was damp and uneven, and she felt the air shift as it passed, a cold breeze laced. "Mom!" Max's cry pierced through the swirling chaos, and her heart surged. He was still alive. "Stay back!" she screamed, but doubt rippled through her voice. A mother always patrolling her child, even in the face of death. The creature snarled, turning and fixing its fiery gaze on her once more. It stepped closer, its weight causing the ground to tremble beneath them. With gritty resolve, Sarah scrambled to her feet, her eyes darting for an escape. "Max, stay where you are!" She barreled toward the nearest tree, determined to shield her son, but felt an unrelenting urge to follow a thread of red panic deep inside. What if her flight put him in more danger? As she choked down her fear, sudden thoughts spiraled. Could she fight? The very thought was laughable. But in a dim light of desperation, she snatched up a fallen branch, wielding it like a weapon, as adrenaline coursed through her veins. The creature froze, eyes narrowing, as if sensing her newfound resolve. Sarah didn't falter. She had seen despair turn into resolve. "You want us? We'll fight." The air filled with the sour scent of the forest, and for a moment, Sarah found strength in her fear. "Run, Max!" she shouted again, this time balled fists raised. She was ready to protect him no matter the cost. But what was left of the darkness behind her glimmered, stirring, pulsing with a malevolent hunger. In that moment, confusion swirled around her, fear and bravery wrestling for dominance. She took a trembling breath, heart pounding like thunder, knowing she stood at the edge. A realization crashed over her like a tidal wave. "Max, where's the exit?" And then, silence again. The darkness loomed, palpably pregnant with terror,
and she understood this battle was only just beginning. What price would she pay to find her son when the shadows sought to claim them both? The darkness seemed to pulse, alive and aware. Sarah's breath felt shallow. Each inhale quickened as she searched frantically for Max, dread clawing at her instincts. The shadows danced menacingly, their edges fraying like the thin thread of her calm. "Max," she called again, voice trembling, desperate to fill the void of silence. There was no answer, only the heavy breathing of the creature, a guttural reminder of its presence. She scanned the clearing, the moonlight casting eerie shapes across the underbrush. Around her, trees stood like guardians of doom, their twisted limbs stretching toward her, as if reaching out with greedy fingers. Could they be hiding? Could her son be trapped, ensnared by a nightmarish fate? Another whimper echoed, but it was impossibly distant now. It twisted her stomach in knots. "I'm coming," she pleaded into the shroud of night, uncertainty lacing her voice. Sarah tightened her grip on the branch, its surface rough and real, a humble shield against the terror that encroached. The creature surged forward, lunging with deadly intent. Sarah barely had time to react, spinning to the side as claws swiped through the air, grazing her. Pain lanced through her side. She gasped, falling to the ground, the wet earth slapping against her skin. She could feel warmth trickling down her side, mingling with the chill of her surroundings. Panic surged, but there was no time for despair. She rolled over, fighting through the haze, pushing herself up. "Max!" Silence. A scream clawed at her throat, the sound trapped, suffocated by fear. She couldn't lose him, not now. Gathering her resolve, she pressed a hand against her wound, staggering to her feet. The landscape spun for a moment, then steadied. With grim determination, she stepped deeper into the shadowy woods, each step a defiance against the lurking beast. "Stay hidden, Max," she urged, heart racing faster than her legs could carry her. A low growl rumbled through the trees, and she felt the vibrations deep within her bones. Fear threatened to engulf her again, but she pushed it aside, focusing on the whimper that had pulled her from the brink earlier. It was closer this time, a thread of hope stitching her resolve. "Is that you?" she whispered, taking another step, then another, inching into the gloom that felt sagging and oppressive, alive with menace. The growl came again, layered with an unsettling urgency. She spun around, and there it stood, the creature stalking her like prey, a nightmare etched in muscle and darkness. It twisted its head, long and predatory, snout low to the ground, nostrils flaring as it caught her scent. Her heart thundered loud enough to drown out her thoughts. "Max, where are you?" The words slipped out, raw and urgent, echoing into the ominous night. But in the blink of an eye, something caught her attention, a shuffling behind a nearby thicket. "Mom!" Max's voice trembled, low but there, a beacon of light piercing the encroaching dark. "Stay there!" Sarah yelled, racing toward the sound, every instinct fighting against the dread that the creature could leap for him at any moment. But she didn't see it. Where was the boy? What if the monster got to him first? A sickening clench sent chills down her spine as the creature shifted, tension stifling the air around her. Branches crackled and snapped beneath its weight, closing in. Sarah turned, her heart plummeting as it eyed her, drool hanging from its snarling mouth, a grotesque promise of violence. "Max!" she screamed again, the panic swallowing her whole. Silence, heavy and unbearable, descended once more. Had she brought it here? Had her desperation led him to danger? The moment stretched, and everything paused. The growl receded, leaving an anticipatory hush that thickened the air. Then she saw it, a fleeting shadow darting past her from the corner of her eye, a flicker of movement. "Max!" But the creature dropped low, poised like a coiled spring, and certainty hit her like a gut punch. "Run!" she shouted, not knowing who she was instructing. The woods around
Her became a stage of terror as she lunged forward, her heart pounding wildly with the rhythm of the hunt, knowing any second could be their last. Max's safety was still out there, hidden in the shadows, where hope struggled against the backdrop of dread. But whatever it was that lurked in the dark, it was only just beginning its hunt, and Sarah had awakened something far worse than fear. What secrets lay within the heart of this forest, waiting to be unraveled? The forest closed in around her, the trees looming like ancient sentinels, their gnarled branches twisting upward in a tangle of shadow and mystery. Each rustle sounded like a whisper, as if the woods themselves were conspiring against her, dousing her hopes in cold dread. Sarah pushed through the underbrush, each step a gamble against a looming eye that watched, waited. "Max!" she screamed again, her voice a ragged plea biting through the darkness. She could feel the blood seeping from her side, warm and sickly, yet she pressed on, her desperation overriding the pain. It clawed at her mind, the fear that every second left them both more exposed. The growl echoed again, a rumble that resonated deep in her bones. This time it was followed by a sharp yelp, a cry that twisted her stomach, a response to that growl, one that sent a shiver rushing through her veins. She was being hunted, that much was clear, but the thought that something could have found Max filled her with frenzy. "Max, where are you?" She stumbled over a root, arms flailing to steady herself. The shadows seemed to ripple around her as she regained her balance, a wisp of movement catching her eye. Was it him? Had he dashed away from the thing that prowled their nightmares? No, it was just a trick of the light, a flicker of her imagination tearing at her sanity. As she continued, the ground beneath her feet shifted ominously. Each step it felt less stable, as if the forest itself were trying to mislead her. A sharp sound behind her now, a crack, as if the very earth was protesting her presence. She spun around, breathing heavily, but nothing emerged. Then the growl came again, vicious and low, as the creature danced in the shrouded canopy, drawing closer. She felt the air chill, a heavy weight pressing against her chest, as if the darkness itself were alive. "Max, stay quiet," she hissed, moving precariously towards the sound, frantic and half-crazed. The silence around her had a malevolence that wrapped around her like a serpent, squeezing, as panic threatened to squeeze her heart even tighter. She strained to sum up the courage to call out again, but the words choked in her throat. "Mom?" A ghostly whisper drifted from the shadows, trembling like a leaf caught in an autumn breeze. Relief surged, flooding her with a gleam of hope. Was it really him? "Max, where are you?" She forced the words out, but they quivered, barely stronger than her pulse. I'm hiding." That voice, so small and fragile, seemed to come from a fissure in the trees, from a nightmare waiting to engulf her. "Do not move." Sarah's command was fierce, even as fear gripped her gut. She could sense the creature lurking, its hunger palpable, and every instinct screamed for her to retreat into the thick shadows where Max was concealed. But she would not abandon him. She edged forward, tiptoeing through the blackened woods with reluctant dread, when suddenly she heard movement behind her again. This time it was heavier, more insistent. The ground shook slightly beneath her feet. Turning around, she caught sight of the creature emerging into the flickering moonlight, its hulking figure cloaked in darkness, sharp teeth gleaming like knives. Everything in her screamed to flee, but she had to retrieve her son first. It eyed her, muscles coiling with every slight movement. She could see the glint of its eyes, hungry and terrible, stringy tendrils of drool hanging like despair. And in that moment she realized how utterly unprepared she was, exposed in a way she couldn't comprehend. "Max!" She took a frantic step back, the growl erupting impossibly closer, vibrating through the air as she felt the grip of terror tighten around her throat. Silence descended like a guillotine.
The creature's growls suppressed the night, wrapping around her soundlessly. She felt its breath, hot and fetid, slithering against her neck, squeezing the very life from her as she rounded on the spot where she knew Max should be. But then she heard it, a faint rustling behind the low bramble, a tremor of movement, a heartbeat in the dark. Or was it another presence? Sarah's heart raced as shadows collided in her mind. And as the creature lunged, tearing through the darkness, she realized the truth was unraveling fast. Secrets buried deep in the forest, whispering her name. With her son's life hanging in the balance, a chilling question crept through the air. Could the real horror be the forest itself? Terror struck anew, unrelenting, and she knew this night was far from over. A howl shattered the night, a sound that sliced through the stillness like glass. Sarah flinched as the creature lunged forward, eyes glistening with malice, teeth bared in a grotesque grin. Time seemed to stretch out as she scrambled in another direction, leaving her heart pounding in her throat, her instinct screaming for survival. "Max!" she shouted one last time, desperation clawing at her voice. The shadows twisted like fingers, reaching out for her, urging her deeper into the black maw of the forest, while something monstrous pursued her. She had to reach him. He was so close, and yet, with every moment, she felt the distance between them spreading wider. The ground swayed, and she stumbled again, bracing herself against a thick trunk as panic gripped her. Were the trees shifting, widening the space, or was it all her cruel imagination? A sharp pain
shot through her side, reminding her of the blood seeping through her shirt, a brand of pain that only fueled her fear. A crash echoed through the darkness. The creature was tearing through the forest, branches snapping, the very landscape protesting its passage. It was a beast, a disaster personified, and it hungered. Her heart raced at the thought. Was it hungry for her, or was it searching for Max, a predator drawn to an easier target? Gritting her teeth, Sarah forced a path deeper into the dark thicket. Each breath was labored, each second dangerous. "Max!" she cried again, her throat raw, fear coiling tight in her stomach. Nothing. Only silence, heavy and thick, a suffocating blanket that swallowed her words. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath, the wind stilled, holding tight to whatever whispers echoed through its depths. Then she heard it, another rustle, soft but distinct, coming from her left. Abandoning all thought, she darted behind the nearest tree, pressing her back against the rough bark and straining her ears. The soft thrum of something moving, something just out of view, sent a cold shock through her body. Suddenly she spotted a flash of movement, a figure, small, crouching, trembling within the shadows. Relief washed over her, bittersweet with the fear of discovery. It had to be Max. "Max, it's me," she whispered, stepping back out into the open, heart hammering in her chest. But as she did, a shadow loomed over her, the growl turning gravelly and deep, rattling inside her. The creature spotted her. Any hope for surprise vanished like smoke in the wind. It snarled, baring its jagged teeth, a low rumble vibrating through the ground. "Run!" she screamed. The words erupted as if from a desperate well of strength she didn't know she had. She plunged forward towards Max, the dark shape swirling around them like a storm, reality warping under the weight of fear. "Mom!" Max cried, darting out from his hiding spot, eyes wide with terror. "Come on!" She grabbed his hand, and together they fled, into the brambles, through pockets of dim light spilling from the moon above. Behind them, the monster tore after them, relentless. It felt almost like the forest itself was urging it on, more than just a beast prowling underneath. They dashed, branches slashing at their faces, thorns snagging at their clothes. Each heartbeat echoed like a drum in her ears as they stumbled toward a small glade, a thin shaft of pale light slicing through darkness. But just as they broke into the clearing, the world fell silent once more. The shadows drew back, but not entirely. An eerie glow surrounded the edges, and for a moment all felt impossibly calm. Too calm. "Sarah?" Max whispered, a tremor lacing his voice. She looked down at him, confusion folding into the corners of her mind. And then a voice whispered from the trees, just barely perceptible, but chilling to the core. "You shouldn't have come here." She spun, searching desperately for the source as the darkness closed in again. A pit in her stomach opened wide as realization settled. It wasn't just the creature they were running from. There was something darker, something waiting in the woods. "What is it?" Sarah's voice trembled. "Mom!" Max yanked on her sleeve, eyes wide. "Look!" Before she could react, the hairs on the back of her neck stood at attention. Something moved inside the shadows, something far worse than the beast. Deep within the forest, secrets awakened, eyes watching with an insatiable hunger. And the question loomed, what had they truly stumbled upon in this cursed wood? The shadows thickened, whispering tales of the lost, and they were more than just prey. This night had more in store. The air hung heavy, each whisper of the wind quickened by the palpable dread that fell around them. Sarah's pulse soared as she gripped Max's hand, glancing back toward the tightening shadows. The eerie glow pulsed like a heartbeat, greedy for something they weren't yet aware of. Panic clawed at her throat. They had to move. "Stay close," she urged, her voice strained. "We need to get out of here." But as they retreated deeper into the clearing, the atmosphere thickened with a dark presence, a tension that stilled every instinct within her. Max clung tighter, his youthful spirit overshadowed by a visceral panic. He was no longer just a child, he was a beacon of hope she had to protect. Sarah squinted into the gloom, heart racing at the sound of a low, resonating growl that reverberated through the trees. It wasn't just the beast they had fled from. There was an answer in the darkness, lurking just out of view. "Mom, I'm scared," Max whispered, his voice nearly drowning in the overwhelming silence. "Me too, bud," she replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. They began to move again, circling the unfamiliar glade. The trees loomed, feeling like the guardians of some deviant secret. Shadows seemed to lengthen, twisting into grotesque shapes that writhed and shifted as if mocking their every attempt to escape. Suddenly, another growl emanated, but this one was different, laced with a human-like timbre. Sarah's breath hitched. "Did you hear that?" she asked, the words barely escaping her lips. Max nodded, his eyes wide. "What is it?" Just then, the darkness exploded with noise. A giant crashing through the undergrowth, branches snapping like dry twigs. The tree screamed, the creature roared, hungry and desperate. It lost them momentarily, just a shadow flitting past, but the grip of terror only tightened. "Run!" Sarah shouted again, pulling Max toward the far edge of the glen, desperate to find safety. They veered right, pushing through the thick underbrush, each footfall a frantic prayer against the impending doom. The growl returned, now more pronounced, echoed by a chorus of distant whispers. It was as if the very forest was alive, urging them towards something crucial, something deadly. Shadows danced at the corners of her vision, vanishing when she turned to confront them. "Keep moving," she panted, glancing at Max. He was slowing, the fear overwhelming him. "We have to find a way out, just a little further." But the forest wouldn't let them go easily. A thicket rose before them, tangled branches twisting and gnarlish like ancient fingers reaching to claim their prize. "Mom!" Max screamed, tugging at her arm. "What if it catches us?" "No, we are not letting it take us." They stumbled into the thicket, limbs and branches tearing at their clothes, the forest closing in as if trying to swallow them whole. Sarah pushed on, fueled by an indomitable will to survive. It was then that they never expected to see what lay ahead. Figures emerging from the gloom, haunting shapes draped in shadows, silently watching, their silhouettes barely discernible. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling, panic rising anew. Their eyes reflected the glint of the pale moonlight, features obscured in darkness. Then a low, chilling laugh echoed toward them. It wasn't just the beast anymore. This was human, yet distorted, sinister, a sound that reverberated through the trees like a death knell. "Join us," a voice dripped from the shadows, sweet and oily. They had stepped into something far worse than they thought, witnesses to an unfathomable horror. The whisper drew nearer, reaching for their minds, pulling them deeper into madness. "Mom, I don't like this," Max cried, fear spilling from his eyes. But Sarah could only stare, caught in the vice of terror. Each heartbeat thundered in her ears as she slowly realized they weren't just running from the monster. "Max," she began, her heart sinking like a stone. "There's something waiting for us. We need to." Before she could finish, the figure surged forward, shadows blending with the night, leaving her with a chilling revelation. They had become prey, trapped in a web spun by something far more ancient and malevolent. With a jolt, Sarah grabbed Max, pulling him back as the first fingers of darkness reached out. But the urgency in her veins screamed louder. There was no escape now. "What have we stumbled into?" she thought, as they faced the encroaching dread, ready for the fight of their lives, and the night had only just begun. The darkness loomed like a shroud, enveloping them as the figures closed in. Sarah's breath came in frantic bursts, her instincts screaming for her to flee. The shadowed figures laughed, a sound that clawed at her very sanity. They weren't just watchers, they were predators. "Max, hold on to me," she shouted, yanking him closer as she began to back away. Fear was a living thing now, pressing against her chest, urging her to break. But retreating further into the thicket was no option, and when she looked back, the path was vanishing behind them, swallowed into a gaping abyss. The sounds of the forest shifted, melding into a screeching symphony of agony. "Join us," the voice repeated, stretching out, dripping with an allure that made Sarah's skin crawl. It was a call, a twisted invitation cast into the night. The figures moved fluidly, surrounding them, weaving in and out of the shadows like smoke. "Max!" she yelled again, her heart racing. She needed to focus, to fight the looming claustrophobia that threatened to close in. "We need to push through, just a little more." As they stumbled forward, the laughter continued, a harsh echo that made noise crawl under her skin. In that moment, she felt the weight of the unseen eyes boring into her, as if the very earth was watching, eager to claim them. "Mom, I can't," Max whimpered, his small hand gripping hers with an intensity that both terrified and fortified her. She could feel his heart racing in time with her own. "Keep going, baby, we're almost there." But the thicket around them became a maze, branches snapping like bones as something thrashed behind them. No longer just a vague sense of pursuit, the shadows formed into something monstrous, large, bulky, with shimmering eyes reflecting malice and intent. Then the ground trembled. A low growl reverberated through the soil beneath their feet, an ancient promise of pain that echoed against their very beings. "Mom, please." Max's voice broke, and she felt him pull back. "No!" she cried, feeling desperation claw at her throat. She pushed him forward, while the shadows twisted and intensified, their edges sharp as daggers. "Join us," it crooned again, coiling around her like an embrace, the sinister charm grating against her sanity. But Sarah fought it, leaning into her instincts, into the protective rage that surged. She could not, would not yield. Suddenly, the path ahead blossomed into an opening, a sliver of dawn filtering through the trees, the ground seemingly leading toward the light. "Run!" she yelled, adrenaline propelling them forward, limbs flailing as they broke through the final barrier of branches, tumbling into the clearing. Breathless, they emerged, and her heart soared, until she turned. The figures halted just at the edge of the thicket, eyes still shining, hunger simmering beneath the surface. "Why is it abandoning us?" Max cried, confusion lacing his voice. Sarah's pulse quickened. It's waiting." With each breath, the sense of dread thickened. The forest was no longer a hidden sanctuary. It was an entity, alive and aware. Something terrible beckoned them to return. "Mom," Max's voice trembled as shadows began to stir again, a flicker of movement almost too quick to see. Their presence bled closer, and Sarah felt an ice-cold grip on her heart. "Get back!" she shouted against the silence and growing shadows, every instinct screaming for her to fight, to scream. But then she saw it, a shape darting beyond the edge of the clearing, a monstrous form, a beast born of nightmares, waiting to strike. The figures began to edge closer, their laughter mingling with the primal roar that reverberated through the trees, and the forest sang in agreement. Just when she thought it couldn't get any worse, it happened. A deafening
roar erupted from the depths of the woods, shaking the very roots of the trees, promising that the hunt was far from over. "Mom, it's coming for us!" Max yelled, terror splintering through his voice. "Run!" In the split second of distraction, the shadows lunged forward, merging into one monstrous force, and Sarah realized they weren't just trying to catch them. They were leading them back to something far worse than they could imagine. "Where are we going?" she thought frantically, as they fled from the only thing she feared even more than the shadows that desired them. "Where are we going?" she thought frantically as they fled from the only thing she feared even more than the shadows that desired them. A blinding light glimmered ahead. It felt like salvation, but could it also be the trap that would seal their fates forever? The forest pulsed with anticipation as they raced toward the unknown. The moon had risen to its zenith, casting a silvery glow over the chaos. Sarah and Max crashed through the underbrush, their hearts pounding in unison. There was no time to look back. The shadows behind them swelled with a sinister momentum, as if the very forest conspired against their escape. It was no longer a game of hide and seek. This was a race against the primal depths of fear. "Mom, I can't keep running," Max gasped, his small body almost crumpling beneath their terror. "Just a little more, sweetie. We're almost there," Sarah urged, her breath coming in quick gasps. An ache spread wide across her side, sharp and burning, but nothing would stop her now. Ahead, a clearing beckoned. The moonlight splashed against the bare ground, illuminating their path and filling Sarah with a burst of hope. But as they stumbled into the clearing, her heart dropped. Surrounding them, the shadowy figure stood still, watching. A cacophony of low growls and shivers pulsed in the thick air, and for a moment silence fell heavy, expectant. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath. "Join us," came the haunting whisper, weaving throughout the clearing, binding Sarah in a web of dread. "No!" Sarah screamed, the panic rushing through her veins. She could feel Max trembling beside her, bolstered by fear, but she hardened her grip around his hand. "We have to push through." A growl erupted from the tree line, shaking the very air around them. Without thinking, Sarah surged forward, leading Max through the encroaching shadows. The figures flickered behind them, but did not follow. There was something waiting at the heart of the darkness, something patient.
But they pressed on. Each heavy footfall rang out like thunder against the forest floor, tearing through the silence. As they ran, the shadows around began to coalesce into something more menacing, a deep, rumbling growl building from the depths of the woods. "What is that?" Max cried, glancing back with wide, terrified eyes. "I don't know," Sarah yelled, fear crackling through her voice as they veered past branches that clawed at them. "But we can't stop." They reached the edge of the clearing, where the trees bowed slightly, welcoming them into a grove where the air, thick with damp foliage, felt different, charged with a foreboding energy. "Do you feel that?" Sarah whispered, the hairs on her arms standing on end. Max nodded, clutching her tighter. She felt his heart racing against hers, a frantic drumbeat against the hostage silence surrounding them. Suddenly, the growl pierced the air again, closer this time, raw and primal, vibrating through Sarah's bones. The shadows on the periphery began to undulate, morphing into figures that moved with sinister grace. "Join us," they beckoned again, hauntingly sweet. "Max, stay with me," Sarah shouted, feeling the threads of panic unraveling in her chest. But the figures stepped closer, shadows thickening, swirling around as if drawn into an unholy dance. They weren't letting them go easily. Terror wrapped tightly around them both, leaving no space for thought. With a desperate lunge, the growl surged into a roar, and from the darker heart of the woods, the hulking beast emerged. Bigfoot, colossal and powerful, its eyes ablaze with primal rage. It stood there, a living nightmare, breathing heavy annoyance as it surveyed the two of them. "Run, now!" Sarah screamed, her voice tearing through the cold night air, as both mother and son bolted into the maze of trees. The creature chased, thunderous footfalls echoing behind them, shadows looming closer as they tangled through the underbrush. Max lagged slightly, and dread clawed at Sarah's heart. "Come on, faster," she urged, adrenaline pushing her forward. Their escape led them deeper into the forest, but as they sprinted, the ground beneath them opened up, tumbling into an abyss. Sarah's breath hitched. A rocky path lay before them, twisted and rugged, leading down into dark pits of unyielding mystery. But there was no other choice. "Take my hand," she yelled, and with a burst of bravery, they launched down the path, branches snapping as the forest roared behind them. The shadows retreated momentarily, caught between the dimensions of reality and madness. "Ahead, there's light," Max rasped, his eyes glimmering with newfound hope. Together, they stumbled down the winding treachery of the path until a breakthrough emerged, an opening leading outside. They burst through into the night sky, breathless and bathed in moonlight. But nothing could prepare them for what lay just beyond the trees. Figures awaited at the edge, gathered once more, ghastly shapes cloaked in the darkness. There was no escaping the forest's grip. They had ventured into a world of nightmares, where the borders of reality were blurred and twisted, with secrets waiting patiently to consume them. "Max, we have to find help," Sarah gasped, stumbling back against the cold bark of a tree, eyes darting in every direction. But before she could guide her son, the shadows lunged forward, their movements swirling with unnatural speed. And in that moment, Sarah realized darkness had claimed them both. "Mom, what do we—" Max's plea silenced abruptly at the sight of the monstrous figures closing in. "Run!" With that final echo, Sarah knew there was no escape from the hell they had stumbled into. The forest had awakened, carrying secrets older than time itself, and there was no sanctuary left in the nightmare that had engulfed them. "Join us," came the whisper again, and as darkness enveloped them, one truth remained painfully clear. Terror begets terror, and they were now part of the forest's dark history, feeding the legends that continue to haunt the land even now. Don't wait. Now's your chance to lock your spot to discover what happens next. You need to subscribe now to catch the next stories, each one packed with thrills and chills. Smash that like button now so the algorithm knows we're doing it right. And don't keep this to yourself. Flood the comments with your reactions and epic theories. Let your voice be heard. Share this video with 5 friends who dare to walk the line of fear with us. Don't wait even one more second. Your support is what keeps this journey alive.